And I just want to begin by making a couple of acknowledgements. Firstly, CARFAC and the Legacy Art Galleries want to acknowledge with respect that the University of Victoria resides on the traditional territories of the Coast Salish and Straits Salish peoples. And secondly, I just want to thank Legacy Gallery for generously hosting us here tonight, and the staff who have helped to accommodate us. Thirdly, I just want to thank CARFAC National and the Access Copyright Foundation for funding tonight's panel. And we're having it here in Victoria tonight as CARFAC BC realizes they have a lot of events in Vancouver that often people who are members on the island can't access. So I'm new to the board. My name's Emily, and I live in Victoria here, so happy to represent CARFAC members here in Victoria and offered to moderate tonight's panel. Yeah, I'd also just like to give, before we introduce the panelists, a little bit of an introduction to what we do at CARFAC for those who are here who aren't members. If you've ever been paid an artist fee for exhibiting your work, you've already benefited from the existence of CARFAC. If you're a member with CARFAC, you belong to an artist-run organization with a 40-year history of representing and protecting the interests of artists across Canada. CARFAC was founded in 1968, and the founding members were named Jack Chambers and Tony Urquhart. I hope I'm pronouncing that name right. And they began with other members to develop a fee schedule that suggested how much artists should be paid when their art was exhibited or reproduced. And since then, that fee schedule has been negotiated annually to reflect changes in the costs of living. And these fees are considered minimum payments for arts institutions and for the use of copyrights and the professional services of visual and media artists. So CARFAC's here to negotiate for a socioeconomic climate that's conducive to the production of visual arts in Canada. And I'll just give you guys a little bit more information about some of the things that CARFAC, like the concrete things that CARFAC has done in the last little while. It's continuing to negotiate for the payment of minimum artist fees in museums and galleries across Canada, with campaigns such as the recent 2014 historic win for artists at the Supreme Court, which obliged the National Gallery of Canada to negotiate minimum copyright fees relating to the exhibition and reproduction right of artists whose work it exhibits, as well as their current artist resale right campaign. CARFAC BC was incorporated a little later in 1990, and its primary goal is to advocate for visual artists in this province and provide information that may assist in artists' ability to flourish professionally. So that's kind of the goal of what we're doing here tonight. Last year's project with CARFAC, which I unfortunately didn't have the pleasure to help with because I just joined the board, but they put together this amazing ebook that you can access online. It's you can find it through the CARFAC website. It's about $10, and you can download the first like 40 pages of it for free. It's called Artists Talk: A Practical Guide to Emerging as an Artist in Canada. And since it's an ebook, it's got like video interviews as well as text. And it's got contributions from a lot of BC artists, gallerists, and arts administrators. I'll just pause. Okay. Great, so thank you for listening to that. I'm sorry, it involved a lot of me reading things. I'm just new to CARFAC, but enjoying my work with them so far. So I'd like to move along to introducing the panelists. I'll just quickly point and say names. This is Sandra Meigs. Leong, I'm saying your last name correctly?
Yes.
Leong, and Breanna Fabbro. And so I'm just going to pass, I'm using the microphone right now. I don't know if we're going to find it necessary. How do you guys feel about just projecting? Good? Okay, microphone is going to be kind of stiff, so let's, that was for the formal part. Now we'll make it a little more informal, and I'll just get each of you to introduce yourselves and spend a few minutes just telling us a bit about your practice, a bit about your background, so that could be your education and otherwise, and a little bit about how you support your art practice, and if it's your main source of income, and if not, what else do you do to support your practice. And I just this is the one part of where we actually have like a PowerPoint that's structured. So we'll start with Sandra.
Yeah. I just want to start off by saying that CARFAC is really important to Canadian artists, and I am proud to say that in 1986 I was on the board of the Ontario section of CARFAC and helped promote and campaign for Bill C-61, which was the legal institution of the artist's fee and the beginning of the Copyright Collective. And of course it took a whole lot of work to get it to become functional within Canada, but it was super exciting. And any of these little steps, like Emily mentioned the event at the Supreme Court in 2014 with the National Gallery. The National Gallery was sort of a bit under the radar, not fully supportive of CARFAC. So the fact that they were made to submit was really very moving for those people that were involved, and a benefit to all artists.
Totally. Awesome.
It was an emotional moment. I came out of grad school in 1980, and I've been making art ever since then. After grad school, I moved to Toronto, because it was the center of where things were happening at that time in Canada, and it was close to Halifax, where I had studied. I mean, it was my closest link, so I moved there and began my career by supporting myself as a waitress, and tried teaching and wasn't really very good at it. So I think I was fired from York. I was a sessional. They just called me and said, you know, your teaching comments weren't very good. I said, oh no. I mean, it's hard being a teacher. Anyway, so I learned furniture upholstery as a trade at George Brown, and I completely recommend any kind of trade for people wanting to support their practice. I finally did get a teaching job again, which I hope I'm better at, and I've been supporting myself that way. Okay.
Yeah. Great. So, Rick.
I have to say first that I have definitely benefited from those CARFAC fees in my art career thus far, so thank you for your contributions for that. I think it's easy to take those kinds of things for granted if they've been, all the work's been done before you get there, and I had no idea you were involved in that. Mm-hmm. That's really interesting. I grew up all over the Lower Mainland, essentially. I used to live here. I did my diploma program from Camosun College locally. Then I transferred into third and fourth year for my undergraduate degree at UVic, and I studied under Sandra. And I can say, I can vouch for your teaching. I thought you were great. And then I basically went right into grad school at Concordia for the next 3 years. And when I graduated from grad school in 2007, I basically was a full-time artist for about 10 years before moving back here in 2011. And since I've been back here, I've been trying to delve into teaching a bit more. I've taught at Visa, I've done some workshops there, and I've taught there. And I've recently started working for Camosun College, which is a really nice full circle for me to kind of go back as a professional from where I had originally studied. So I teach part-time, and so for me, I support my practice in a wide variety of ways, from teaching to selling here and there, to workshops, to speaking engagements, to When I need to, doing trades like construction or painting houses. So whatever I need to do to create and have my practice is what I do. So,
great. Thank you, Rick. Breanna.
Okay. This is my first panel discussion. I'm the emerging artist on the panel tonight. So thank you, CARFAC, for the invitation to participate. I graduated from Concordia. I received my BFA in 2008, and I'm a recent graduate from the UVic MFA program just this past spring. So I'm very fresh out of school, and so right now I'm working at Open Space as a program coordinator. I received a BC Arts Council Early Career Development grant to be able to do that, and I'm also teaching a couple classes at the Vancouver Island School of Art, a drawing class and a painting class, and they'll continue on to next semester. And I'm also excited to be teaching a still life class. Yeah.
Cool. Great. Thanks, guys. Can you at the back all still hear all right? Great.
You're good?
Cool. We will not have to bring in the microphone. Okay, so at this point, we'll kind of get into some more concrete questions. Just checking my notes here. Oh yeah, and we're definitely going to make some room for questions and maybe a bit of a more open floor kind of discussion at the end. I'm going to be keeping an eye on the clock, and we'll save about 15 minutes for that at the end. And the PowerPoint from here on in isn't very exciting. It kind of just has a caption of the category that we're focusing on. So we'll start with personal achievement. And so, I was also just going to say, I don't want this to be too formal, so you guys just feel free to, especially since we're not using the microphone, kind of just jump in wherever, respond to what each other have said. If you don't feel like you can comment, don't comment. Yeah, we'll just keep it really open. So we'll start with talking a little bit about how you define success as an artist, and if you want to expand on that by talking about some of your greatest achievements. Or do I need to say?
Well, I'll start.
Yeah.
Okay,
I'd say completing my master's was my greatest achievement so far. Yeah, it's feeling, again, very, very fresh, and I felt I had a really great experience in a master program. It was very supportive, and it was very specific time to be spending on my practice and developing language and writing about my work, and so I've come out of it feeling like I'm far more equipped than I had before. When I was doing my BFA, I left school feeling not very equipped, I guess, and I did my undergrad at Concordia, so I moved back to Vancouver, and I didn't have that same sort of support network that I had, that I feel I have now. So I feel like moving forward has been a positive experience now being out of school, and still sort of trying to keep that momentum up, I would say that completing my master's feels like a really big achievement right now.
May I?
Yeah, go ahead.
I never really thought about that, and I didn't consider that in this question, but you make a really good point. For someone like me, I dropped out of high school, so when I decided to go back to school, it was a very long journey for me. I was like almost over 10 years just to get my master's degree. Concordia is one of the longest master's degree programs ever at 3 years, so that didn't help, but in a way it did help, because for me, school was a way to practice art full time and push it further in ways that you wouldn't otherwise be able to do. So that's a really good point. I think I'm glad that you mentioned that. I found this one really kind of hard to answer and think about. When I had the Museum of Fine Arts of Montreal acquire a work right out of my thesis exhibition. And that felt like an amazing achievement, because every time I went to the museum and it was showing my painting in different contexts, I had this immense feeling of accomplishment and gratitude that all my hard work getting my degree had led up to that point. But then I don't necessarily think that's a good way to measure success, because that happens so rarely and frequently that if that only happens once and it happens right at the beginning, how do you measure your success afterwards? So now I think that happens in different ways. So success for me in my practice, in my career, is more about, it comes down to the work. If I can make the kind of work that I strive to make and it reaches people in a way that enriches their life experience, then I feel like that's a true success for me. I recently had the opportunity to have a show at the Richmond Art Gallery, and I co-created and exhibited with 3 senior Chinese artists from that community. And they were all senior artists, masters of their craft. They were traditionally trained in China in ceramics, calligraphy, and painting. And for me to be able to show with those senior artists, and it was actually the first time that I was able to have an exhibition and see my name written in Chinese in a professional context, and that felt like a huge accomplishment for me. So I think we measure those accomplishments and those successes in different ways.
Yeah, I think it is it comes down to a personal commitment for me, which is what I think you're saying. And because I think that recognition of my peers is, I take it very seriously, and for me that's a factor of success. Maintaining a current dialogue with the practice of painting, the fact that I can do that is my success, I think. Pushing the boundaries of the discipline and contributing in some way to that dialogue, I think, is a measure of success for me. And I think what I feel is my greatest achievement, and this is very personal, is the fact that I have never wavered in making art ever since, I don't know, I was 20. So I think no matter whatever else happens, the fact that I make art, go to the studio, is going to make me successful.
Just the commitment.
Yeah.
Pure commitment.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great. And in opposition, maybe you guys could talk about what your biggest, the word in the prompt question was failure.
Yeah, I'll start, since
if we could also use the word challenge.
I'm on a roll, and I'm also a bit feeling personal about these things. I was thinking about that, and I, especially looking back to my 20s and 30s, I sometimes get in a bubble, and I don't know. You don't know what's going on. For example, I was in the Biennale of Sydney, Australia in 1982. And I just kind of went over there, la-di-da, I'm putting the show up, and it's really fun. But I didn't take advantage of the opportunity, you know. And that would be my advice to young people, is realize the importance of these endeavors and take as much advantage of them as you can. I mean, I did a few other stupid things, like I had the artist residency studio in New York, and instead of staying for the meeting people that were coming, I went to a party to see an old friend. I mean, that's just kind of stupid. But I know it happens, especially when you're, I think a little smarter now.
Experience.
Once in a while I slip, so
Yeah.
I consider those failures. Yeah.
I feel the same way, actually. I spent 6 years between my undergrad and going back to grad school, and I feel like what you're talking about feels much closer right now, because it's a very recent past where I didn't take myself very seriously. I'm not very good at self-promotion, and I would like say no to things and let opportunities sort of pass me by, and those are things that I sort of wish in hindsight that I had taken myself more seriously right out of my undergrad, and maybe not have given myself such a lengthy time between going back to school, because I really do well in structure like that, and I think that it would have kept me, if I had gone back to school a little bit sooner, maybe I would have been a little bit more focused earlier on. But yeah, I definitely have made decisions to go to parties and different things like that instead of hunkering down.
I think it's partly low self-esteem or something that
I
makes
think
people
so.
do that. Yeah.
I think so. Not having a lot of confidence.
Yeah.
Second guessing.
What about you, Rick?
I think we're all on the same page here, and I think that's probably something to really take note of, is missed opportunities. And I think that those can come from different things, like you were saying, a lack of confidence, but I think that could also happen from overconfidence. And if you're getting a lot of attention at a certain point and people are offering or inviting you to do this or that or be represented by this or that gallery, and you're like, no, I think I'll just stick with this or that and ignore the rest, then those are missed opportunities as well that you're not taking advantage of. So I think no matter whether you have, I'm not saying I have too much confidence, or if you have a lack of confidence, that you just be aware of those opportunities that come your way and take advantage of them. Better to regret something that you've done rather than that which you didn't do, I think.
Great. Okay. Thanks, guys. Yeah, let's move along to the business of art. Such a formal title. This one, there's lots to talk about. How do you guys keep yourselves organized? I guess you're talking, maybe that's a good kind of jumping off point, talking about like missed opportunities and like maybe being distracted by other not career focused opportunities. Do you keep yourselves organized in any way to kind of stay on top of those opportunities, and maybe in other respects too, like maybe as well as just in the studio? Yeah, just kind of some tips you might offer for managing kind of the business side of managing an art practice.
I think this is pretty basic, what any business person would do. Calendar planning, making lists, keeping notebooks, and writing a budget.
Yeah.
Yeah, and setting priorities, managing time management.
Yeah.
You asked for tips, so
Those are tips too, though.
you want tips now or later?
Those are kind of tips. You just listed off a bunch of
Okay.
tips.
They're pretty simple.
Yeah, they're simple tips, but
I think something I'm going to do, a new project for myself, is to build a spreadsheet actually with different deadlines and have various tabs for maybe residency deadlines and grant deadlines, and consolidate some of my lists because they're a little bit all over the place, and it would be nice to have all of that information in one spot so that I can just refer back to it. I think that's something I'm going to do.
I try to have at least one admin day a week. I say try, because I'd way rather sit in front of a painting than a computer screen. So that's difficult for me. I think if you make over $30,000 a year from your art practice, you're obligated to get a GST number. And once you get a GST number, you are made to be on track because the government sends you, you have to do quarterly reports. And when you do those quarterly reports, you have to collect all your receipts and you have to save, take out all the PST and GST and write checks to the government. So they kind of force you to be on track and on time and on schedule. There's no two ways about that. So that kind of helps in that sense. I think other tips might be always try to put away 20 to 25% of all your earnings for taxes at the end of the year. You really don't want to think you had a great year and you spend it all on these art supplies or whatever you need to spend it on, and then it comes tax time and you owe $10,000 or something. That's a terrible feeling. I'm exaggerating, but it can happen.
Yeah.
So when you're saying like budget too, one of the things with the business of art is that it's very uneven. So when you have your own GST number, you're self-employed, you're your own business. And when you have your own business, when you're self-employed, you have good quarters, you have bad quarters. It's all up and down. So when you have good quarters, you have to budget ahead. So the more money you make, the longer you can continue your practice. So it's not ever you're ever overly flush. You always got to think about the future and budget it out ahead. I think that's the best advice that I could give.
GST registering is also good because you get your GST back that you spent on your supplies.
You can write off a lot of your stuff.
Yeah. And I like what you said, Rick, about having like one admin day, and kind of leads to the next question about like your schedule and just how you go about your week and how you kind of budget in studio time versus other things that need to happen in your life. Yeah, how regimented is your schedule?
I'm not very regimented because in my experience, if I don't want to do something, I can sit there all day long and I'm not going to do it. So I try to be really fluid.
Yeah.
And having said that, if you're approaching a deadline, whether it's art or administration or whatever it is, you have to prioritize it. But if you're flexible and you are in a certain mode where you can do those kinds of things, just get it done and then go on to the next.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I find I just can't force myself to do.
But then you do try to have the one day that's like, this is my
I do. I
admin
try
day.
to do that. Yeah.
Just because you really don't want to do those things.
But
otherwise.
that's also part of teaching. You kind of
Yeah.
you can't not do that either.
Yeah.
So that's a good practice to have anyway.
Yeah. What about Sandra or Breanna?
I sort of look at what I want to get done on a weekly basis, and what I want to get done on a daily basis too, and I just try and keep those things in mind as I'm going through my week. I'm somewhat fluid as well with my schedule, but I do like to have an idea of like, keeping it fairly short term so I'm not overwhelmed by things.
Do you guys think, to that fluidity, just because you both have, and maybe Sandra will be similar, do you guys think that fluidity is important to an art practice? To just be flexible, to kind of move with whatever you feel like doing, or?
I'd like to get to a more fluid state, I think. I've been, since being out of school, I had a full-time job at UVic in a non-art related department, and then getting work at Visa and trying to set up some new art studios. I feel like my priorities have been all in those things lately, and so my practice has really suffered. I haven't been spending really any time on my practice, and so I would like to get back to that. So maybe for now I need to have a bit of structure just to get myself back to where I want to be, and then I can sort of allow myself a bit of fluidity. That's sort of my hope as I'm going into the new year.
I have a question. I kind of, more and more, I'm sort of new at teaching too, because I'm just starting to get more and more into it. But the more I do it, the more I feel like teaching is part of my practice. Do you ever feel that?
Teaching, you can get a lot of inspiration for teaching, if that's what you mean.
Yeah,
I mean,
like
I do.
and
Sure, yeah. Oh, yeah, of course, yeah.
Because the more you see,
it's influential,
it expands your worldview.
Yeah,
and
yeah. Yeah, I just wanted to add, when I was thinking about fluidity, I think the point in my life when I was, by necessity, the most fluid was when I was a new mother, because when my daughter was 2 or 3 or 4, it was pretty hard to grab time. And so I would get inspiration from her, and then I would invent projects such as using all of her craft junk and make collages with them when she was taking a nap or something. I mean, you sometimes have to be that fluid with your life, and I didn't do it because I thought it was work or I had to. It was just kind of fluid, like you say. Yeah, I think that was probably the most like spontaneous time of art making. Now it's true, because I'm teaching, I have to slot times for doing things.
You have more of a schedule.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Any other kind of comments on those notes? Like kind of the motherhood thing is interesting. I'm wondering at that time if you had a studio still that you went to, or if you ever had an at-home studio.
Yeah, I did have a studio then down in Chinatown here, and I would have childcare set up so that I would have time to do that.
Yeah, just generally, I'm curious about the at-home studio versus at a different place studio, and how that works for all 3 of you. Yeah.
I really need to go somewhere to work. I find I get really distracted at home. So I definitely budget studio into my, like financially, I'll say get some money or put some money aside for my studio. When I have worked at home, my work's gotten much smaller to accommodate size restrictions. But I definitely feel more productive when I actually go to a space and I'm in that mindset to, okay, now I'm gonna go to the studio, whether I actually work in there, but at least I've sort of switched my brain a little bit to think about it in however it sort of manifests during that day.
It's like going to the office.
Yeah, it is.
I've had both experiences in Montreal. I had my space that was about a half-hour walk, and there's nothing else to do in there but make work. So it was very similar. When I moved here, I found a place that was live and work. I wasn't big on it first because it was a lot smaller space. Space kind of limits the kind of work that you make. But now I'm quite used to it. I think the idea is I can kind of leave something and come back to it in an hour. I feel like I'm always working, essentially, but in a way that's not in a way that would get burnt out from, but in a really organic and natural way. So I think everyone has their own sort of way of making, and you have to find what is the most productive means for you. And working with what you have. I mean, I think that there's limited options here in terms of studio space, so I'm also big on the idea that you can make whatever work you need to make in the space that you have available to you. If all you have is pencil and paper, then just draw on your kitchen table.
Yeah, I think that idea of fluidity really ties into the at-home studio. I was curious about that, mostly because that's the situation I'm in right now, is the at-home studio. But I know that for some people, the at-home is too distracting. There's too many other things going on. But in Victoria, do you find, so you're a live work studio now, yeah, and have you ever tried to find a studio in Victoria? Was that kind of your scenario from day one, and you never really tried to branch out from that?
That was my scenario from day one, but it was going to be temporary.
Yeah.
And then I started looking around for something bigger, and I just didn't find anything that was within my budget.
Maybe we can just talk, like, for the audience a little bit about if you guys have things to comment on finding a space in Victoria, if that proved challenging, or if you think there's a lack of space here, or if just untapped. This is for you, Breanna.
Yeah, I was going to say that's your...
Actually, I got into the Ministry of Casual Living like right after I finished school. There was someone who was looking for someone to share a studio with them, and I was like, okay, great. Me, please. And then, of course, our studios were sold, and we've moved to a new location. So if anyone's looking for a studio, we have space.
Is that in Vic West?
It's in Esquimalt.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So for me, it hasn't been very challenging in terms of like acquiring a studio.
Yeah.
I think it comes down to the kind of space that you're needing. Like for me,
definitely.
I didn't want to share because I had shared and then it didn't share, and I didn't want to go back to sharing.
I think it's very hard in Victoria
Yeah.
to find studio space, and
Is it harder than, say, maybe?
I mean,
Toronto?
I'm lucky. I'm
Yeah.
not, but
at the time, I'm sure you were.
I know from students and people moving here, it's been a real struggle to find something affordable. And I think the city could do a lot more to provide incentives for commercial spaces to rent to artists. And I know there's a lot of hang-ups in the commercial business about insurance for these kind of rentals and all that kind of thing. But
There's just so much vacant space, though.
Yeah.
It's not being used.
Yeah. I mean, one really possible strategy is to get together with a bunch of people and look for a space together, and then take the leap and sign a lease and have a good organized person in charge to administrate all these rentals that you're then going to have to be collecting. But sometimes it takes a kind of leadership like that to get something going, and then who knows, maybe that could turn into a co-op. Or
surely that's how
like
most of those start.
Yeah.
Well, it sounds similar to what the ministry does.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Maybe swooping back to touch on the work-life balance thing a little bit more. Maybe you guys can speak to if you find that you have struck a balance in terms of your art life, your work life, if you have other work that's not art related, and your personal life. Do you think that you've managed to find a kind of balance there, or is this a bit of a struggle?
Nope.
Nope, no balance.
Nope, no balance.
What takes over?
I haven't been in the studio at all.
Oh.
Yeah.
So there is no balance right now.
Yeah.
I'm striving for balance.
Yeah.
I think I mentioned I'm always working.
You're still
I'm always
working.
thinking about something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I try to make it as easy for myself as possible, that whatever, if I have an idea and I want to work on something, it's just there.
Yeah.
Just pick it up and start
Just go
working.
for it. Yeah.
But it hasn't interfered with my personal life, I don't think.
Yeah.
My friends.
Good. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have any friends.
You don't have any.
No, I'm basically a hermit, so
So it doesn't matter.
I'm very happy.
That kind of, it kind of leads into the art communities section, which is the idea of friends, or maybe even not friends, but the art community, and if that plays a role for you, not just socially, but as part of your practice Yeah. Is it a part of success for you having kind of integration or access to an art community? Or could you live in
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I joke that I'm not social, but I feel very much part of a community, and that's a large community.
Not just Victoria.
Yeah. And I think it's always important for an artist to be in the center, if not geographically, at least mentally, and always have a dialogue with that center. I mean, we are a community of artists. It's quite different for me. I think I come from a time before computers, and I don't know how to use social media. I know that's really, really important now. Maybe somebody can teach me how to do Facebook. I don't know, but I think that is really important. I think I've managed my career without it because that's what I was kind of launching off of.
Yeah.
But I think that being part of a community takes time. It takes diligence to stay connected, especially when you're not on Facebook. And I think it's really important.
In what ways, I'm just curious, as somebody who's totally embedded in social media, like what ways do you stay connected, especially if you have connections like in Toronto? What's kind of, how do you maintain those relationships?
I mostly use email, and I also travel a lot. And whenever I go there, I call people and I meet people, and I go to openings. I mean, you can do that here. It's very important to make connections and actually talk to people and step out of your comfort zone a little bit and meet people.
Yeah, I feel like I spent a lot of time volunteering at Open Space before I approached them to ask if they'd like to write the early career development grant with me, and so it's taken some time to develop, sort of nurture that relationship, and I feel like doors have opened because of the community that I'm in right now. Working at Visa, in the summer I did a very short stint at the AGGV, and I feel like the community is very important, and I feel that support.
Yes, community is important. I agree. As far as social media goes, I just do, I have a website and I do one. I think it's important not to dilute your practice by kind of spamming it everywhere, because then it becomes noise that people tune out. So I would say focus on one or two kind of outlets and really curate them yourself and control how you present yourself. As far as community, I think that art making is a very social thing to do. It brings people together, gets them out of the house. It's about communication. We're communicating very different things through visual language. So I think it's an inherently social thing to do, and it is about developing and fostering that idea of community with one another. So going out to openings, going out to artist talks, that from artists that come from across the country and around the world, those are all very important things. And they'll expand your worldview, and they'll probably expand the kinds of things you talk about within your own practice. And I think that one thing about this community in particular is that because it's an island, it can be very insular and very isolating from the rest of the country, but I think that could be a strength as well. Because of that isolating insular aspect, we have the potential to become a very strong community in terms of solidarity and kind of creating an identity for ourselves in terms of cultural production. And I think the closer we are as a community, the clearer that could be, perhaps.
Are there any challenges that come with it's insular, it's small, I guess obviously there are challenges. How do you guys get off the island? How do you get your work and your practice off the island?
Well, I think it is important to travel, for sure. And I really like that idea of being central in your mindset, in your mind. I think that would make a huge difference. And because feeling that connection with all those other people, I mean, I've gone to some art fairs in Toronto, and it's remarkable how everyone seems to know everyone, and it's like a huge family reunion in many ways. So I think that speaks a lot about community and the Canadian art community in particular, and I think that's something to work towards.
Yeah. Do any of you have connections outside of Canada that are strong, or do you feel like your art community is mostly a Canadian one?
Outside of Canada?
I go to the States just because I love New York, so I try to go there every year or two.
Yeah.
And I just want to say also, the great benefit to me to being in Victoria is I feel free, because I don't think anybody really cares what happens here.
Or if you go to openings.
Yeah.
Or...
Well, no, it's not so much openings, but I'm speaking on a creative level.
Yeah.
That we're not in the eye of people. People don't really care about Vancouver Island, so you can do whatever you want, and it gives me a sense of freedom. I like it.
Yeah, I had a friend who I met this year who was entrenched in the Toronto art scene, and she emailed me a few months later and was like, I'm going to move out west, because she feels like Toronto is like claustrophobic or something, and that there's a lot of pressure. A lot of kind of, peer pressure.
Yeah, I think artists here are very independent-minded, and they do what they want to do.
Yeah. Great. Yeah. Okay. So, let's talk about money, which is kind of like what the title of this is supposed to be about. Income. How do you fund your art practice, kind of in concrete terms? Do you write grants, or do you sell work? Do you subside on CARFAC fees?
I wrote by any means necessary. do whatever you got to do.
Yeah. And you kind of mentioned that at the start.
Yeah, I kind of talked a little bit about that, but like part-time teaching, selling here and there. I get invited to do things like commissions or take part in some things. I remember getting this email in broken English asking if I wanted to take part in this art project in Ecuador, and if so, please send my passport number. And I was kind of like, okay, I'll just do it.
Really?
And it was this amazing experience.
Wow.
I went to Ecuador for 10 days. I represented Canada as a team of 4 artists in the project, and I made it a great sort of body of work from it. So cool. I think it's those things where you're kind of just being a yes person and not missing those opportunities that come your way, and taking those risks, and not putting things in a hierarchy of opportunity. Just if it looks interesting to you and you think that you'll get something from it in terms of informing your practice in a certain way, maybe it'll inspire a body of work or what have you. And if you can get paid on top of that, those are great things. But like I said earlier too, a business goes up and down, and sometimes, just do odd jobs, manual labor, whatever I got to do to keep the ball rolling, like being committed fully to cultural production and art making, no matter what. I think the biggest question is, and I know this may be contrary to this whole panel, but I think as an artist, if someone who's committed to a lifetime of making art, you have to think, do you make art to make money, or do you make money to make art?
That's a solid question to ask. Yeah.
Because if you're trying to make money, art's not really maybe the best
Yeah.
career.
I think the point of the panel is more about how do you sustain your art practice?
Right.
not
Yeah.
How do you make a profit off your art practice?
Well, it's not necessarily either or.
Yeah.
You know, there are very successful artists out there that do make a living
Yeah.
off their art.
Mhm.
That's not to say that you can't do that.
Mhm.
But that's, you know, that that's not for everyone.
No.
Everyone has to find their own path in that.
Because maybe you don't want to do just what will sell, but what you want to do, and that might not equate to a dollar sign in the end.
Well, again,
Yeah.
I think some people could do what they want
Yeah.
and still make
Yeah.
money. I think they're just exceptionally lucky people.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think teaching is a good way to do it because I think teaching informs my practice. I do a lot more research than I would otherwise in terms of presenting lectures for my students and building curriculums or thinking about projects that would be interesting and useful. These are all things that can inform my own practice again, and that I can also make some money to support my own practice, and I'm also contributing to the artist community.
Yeah.
So teaching is a great thing to get into, I think, even if it sometimes means it takes you away from the studio.
Mhm.
I don't think it's, again, has to be either or.
Right. Before doing my master's, I worked in a large corporation, and so I sustained my practice by working a day job. And you're right. I'm excited now to be working at Visa and at Open Space, to be in these environments that will sort of inspire my practice too. So when I get back in the studio, it'll be it'll feel more balanced that way, because I don't have to switch my brain off to do real menial clerical work in a whole other context. You know, it still feels closer, I guess. Yeah. But I haven't been able to sustain my practice in any other way than having generally a full-time day job. Although having this grant now has sort of been a bit of a game changer for the time being.
I think having a trade skill is really great for anyone, no matter what age. I mean, you never know when the teaching's gonna dry up, and teaching is very, very competitive. There's so many people looking for teaching jobs these days, so it's good to have a skill that you can always fall back on. Grant writing is important, and sometimes getting one little grant for $1,000 can make a huge difference. And not only is it the money, but it's also the acknowledgement of the recognition of having earned that grant. So I think it's always good to apply for grants. You never rely on grants, because of course you don't know if you're going to get it or not, but it's good to do it. It always helps me clarify what my mission is in that particular project anyway. So that's always been really important to me, is applying for grants.
I think that goes into your previous comment too about earning the respect of your peers, because a lot of those grants are juried by your peers, and they're looking at your work and they think that what you're doing is worth funding. So to be able to get a grant like that, again, is having the respect of your peers in that way, and that, I think, can go a long way in terms of morale. And also, when you apply for a lot of grants, like you were saying, you can't rely on grants. There's just not that much money to go around. But what you're doing is you're focusing your thoughts around what you're doing. But what you're also doing is you're getting your work. It's another way of disseminating your work. It's getting your work out in front of these juries who may be teaching at different places across the country or in different kinds of positions.
And multidisciplinary juries too.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a way to get your work out there. And then you apply year after year, and people will see how you progress. People notice. I mean, if you're on a jury, you might look at 100 applicants, but you remember them.
Especially those that apply
again and again, yes.
Yeah,
and again.
You see them again next year.
Can you offer any kind of concrete grant writing advice to the audience?
Write it 3 times. Get somebody else to read it before you send it. Be clear and concise, not over wordy.
No jargon.
Make sure your images are top notch. That's my best advice.
Everything she said.
I think jargon's a really big one.
Jargon's big.
Yeah, be clear. Like, don't soak it in jargon, because you could be submitting to a multidisciplinary jury, and if there's someone, say, with like a music background, they need to be able to understand what it is you're trying to do. So the what, why, who you're, I guess, wanting to reach maybe with the work, like your audience, and then they have to be able to they have to be able to want to support it too, right? Put money behind it, so they have to believe that you have the chops to like carry out the project. Yeah. So,
yeah. And in my personal experience with writing a BC Arts Council grant twice, you can call and get concrete feedback on, like, not if you apply for an exhibition, sometimes they won't tell you or can't afford the time to tell you what was good or bad about your proposal, but with BC Arts Council and probably Canada Council too, I would assume, you can call and get some concrete feedback. Have you ever tried any sort of alternative funding methods? Crowdfunding? I've heard of artists using crowdfunding for like residencies. Any experiences there?
I know some artists who have had success with that.
The crowdfunding?
Crowdfunding.
Yeah. They'll like say they have, if you fund me to go to this residency, if you pitch $25, I'll give you an artwork at the end.
Yeah.
Like a little postcard sized work.
Well, I've been with different organizations who have used it for like renovation costs or different sorts of initiatives. I was with an organization in Vancouver called Dynamo Arts Association, and then with the Ministry of Casual Living currently. So we've been using crowdfunder for that, and it does generate some money, but like I haven't done it on a personal level.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty new kind of like trending thing. Okay, exhibiting your work. What are some of the primary ways that you go about getting exhibitions, or maybe in the past or now?
You apply?
You apply, but like,
there's
you can apply, or you could do kind of the more networking, meeting curators. Do you have experience in both, or do you lean towards one or the other?
I think applying to institutions and artist-run centers is a good way to introduce your practice to them, and generally depending on the institution, they will have to program 3 years in advance to get their funding. When they apply for their own funding, they have to have a 3-year programming schedule, so that when you're applying for these things, if you don't hear back in a couple of years, don't panic. Well, I've applied for some things and not heard anything back until 2 or 3 years later, and then somewhere, like, they just out of the blue want to have a show. Yeah, totally. It's like,
true.
who is this? So that can happen. Networking for me with curators, it's more about community. I've been in many sort of openings and situations where I've seen curators almost like attacked by artists in a room. And it's not pleasant to see. And it's not pleasant to look at, and it's not pleasant for the curator will not like you after that. It's pretty much guaranteed. Don't go into those when you're like people have different ideas what networking is, but when you are networking, think of it as like developing relationships to foster a sense of community. Don't think about what can this person do for me. It's not always about you. And then if you develop those kinds of real relationships, not just with curators, but with your peers and whoever else, then that's more likely to lead to opportunities to show than just hounding somebody for a show. I'm represented by a gallery, and the director of the gallery that represents me, we were in Vancouver together. We're touring around different galleries, saying hi. She knew everyone. And we're just touring and looking at art and seeing who had what. And without fail, each one of them, in some way or another, stated unequivocally in their own way that artists don't find them, they find the artist. So even for commercial galleries, they don't want a lot of like binders of your stuff. Yeah. I think, again, it's about introducing, like, okay, so if they're saying that they like to be able to find the artist, how do you make that happen? Well, one of those ways is to have shows at public galleries or artist institutions, or creating pop-up exhibitions, making those things happen yourself, and inviting them to check it out in a neutral sort of ground. That would be some advice.
That's great.
Yeah, that's really good advice.
And go to openings.
And go to openings.
But no pressure.
No pressure.
Yeah.
I think another continuation of that is to become informed about what various curators' interests are. What are they most showing? What kind of shows do they put together? What does the commercial gallery, who do they show? And would your work even fit in there? So part of it is yourself becoming familiar with all of the possibilities for your own work, because you want your work to be in a family of supportive artists, and that's going to help you. The more you know, that's going to help you. I think it's very important. It was really important for me at a young age to learn to step out of my comfort zone. I mean, and not to step up at an opening with my images and say, look at this, but
just to introduce
like
yourself.
You say, just get to know people. But secondly, when you do make the leap of submitting a proposal, because many artist-run centers do accept proposals, don't feel so humiliated about rejection, because they get so many, it's so competitive. And I think, like Rick said earlier, it does you well to have people see your work, even if they don't accept it. You never know, they might remember it 3 years later and say, oh yeah, I remember that. So it is good to put yourself out there when it's invited, and don't take it personally if there is a rejection. I think also, and this is about getting yourself out there. I took public speaking course. It was a night course. I mean, it wasn't a big deal because I was very shy, and I found speaking in public horrifying. And that was really, really useful for me. And I also took assertiveness training to learn behaviors, which are somewhat manipulative, I must say.
Useful as a teacher?
The tricks they teach you, I mean, it's very funny. But all these things were just useful, if only to boost self-confidence. And sometimes you just have to bite the bullet and do things that make you uncomfortable. And learning to articulate in a meaningful way to people is important. I also wanted to say on the subject, I don't know if this is under another thing, but
That's okay, we can jump around.
it's been really important to me to negotiate once you do get an offer.
A fee for the exhibition?
Negotiate the whole deal.
Yeah.
What's my responsibility? What's the gallery's responsibility? Make sure you're both understanding the same things, and you can even be quite forward and send an email and say, am I doing this, 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 and you're doing that, that, that. I mean, sometimes a dealer will present a contract. I know institutions always have a contract that you agree upon, but it's important just to communicate clearly what the responsibilities are.
And to add to that, those agreements are negotiable. If there's something you don't feel comfortable with, it's definitely good to assert yourself and say so.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe in Victoria, like we have a few spaces here, and a lot of them are smaller spaces. They're maybe a bit more accessible, but they maybe don't have, and this is me speaking a little bit from personal experience, but they don't have a lot in the way of like structure or contracts, and there does seem to be kind of a lot up in the air. So I think that's just kind of affirming that advice, especially I feel like when you're an emerging artist, there's a lot up in the air, and if you're not clear about it, it could just kind of be a little messy sometimes. But in Victoria, have you all exhibited here to the point that you feel that you've exhausted it, or do you feel like there's some untapped spaces here that you would like to exhibit in still?
I've only exhibited at exchanges in Victoria, so there's still options for me, I think.
Options.
But I just wanted to say, working at Open Space, because I haven't had any shows where I had a contract really, except for exchanges. I'm pretty sure I had to sign.
Contract.
Yes, most. But when we send out the contract to the artist, it's like in draft form, so they can review it and then highlight parts that they're concerned about or whatever, and then send it back. And so it's a bit of an exchange that happens until, I guess, you reach that final contract and it's signed. So I have seen that.
So you've been on both ends.
Yeah, but that's my experience of it so far. Sorry,
I don't think the
changed subject.
resources are ever tapped out. I mean, you can always
Invent your own exhibition. Yeah.
Even if you've shown in one space, you can have a very different kind of show.
Yeah.
Second time round.
Yeah, with a very different body of work.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. Ooh, this commercial representation. We kind of have touched on commercial representation a bit already, but maybe we can talk about and we are on kind of the topic of contracts. What's the common commission for a commercial gallery for those who don't have experience with it? And are there any things that you can kind of recommend artists to watch out for in that type of contract? Or, just general advice about commercial representation, because it seems to be a bit of a far off field for some people. It's quite mysterious.
Is it?
I don't know.
I think 50%, 50-50 is pretty normal. And I think it's very important to learn the reputation of the dealer before you decide to go with that dealer. Get to know what other artists think of the dealer, what basically what the reputation is, because there are some very shady characters out there. And I was in a legal dispute with a dealer in Toronto, and it took emotional toll. It went on for 4 years, and she put all my work in storage and didn't tell me where it was. And there are people like that, so you have to look out for yourself and be careful.
And I think that goes back to the networking and
Yeah.
forming those, talking to people, and I think that kind of thing is something that you would learn in as part of that.
Yeah.
I think the 50-50 is very standard. One thing that, a couple of things that are common that you might want to look out for is, one, if they want exclusivity, maybe they do, maybe you don't, or vice versa. And transportation, who's responsible? Those are big costs, so that's something to negotiate as well. The way that I like to think about this 50-50 thing is, it may sound like a lot, but galleries, if you're in a good gallery, they'll do a lot for you. They handle that business aspect of marketing and taking it to artist fairs and presenting it to curators and directors whom you may not have access to normally. So I feel like if you're with a good gallery, it's a very fair exchange, and I would recommend you think of it as like a teamwork. You can accomplish more sometimes with a gallery than just on your own. But it really depends on the gallery, right?
Okay. Maybe on that note, briefly, kind of leading into marketing, you were talking a little bit earlier, Rick, about self-promotion and kind of like curating your website in a particular way and like not spam, you said don't spam your work around.
There's different philosophies around that, I suppose.
Yeah, no, for sure. I'm just curious if any of you can speak to kind of self-promotion and how you deal with that and the importance of having a website. Is it necessary? And maybe if any of you can speak to like how other social media platforms kind of function for you, if they do at all. Nope.
I think a website is absolutely essential.
Yeah.
Because if you're meeting someone, you're not going to have your work on you. You can say, check out my website, and people get to know each other's work that way. That's the one thing I do.
And it's a way for strangers to contact you.
Yeah.
Too, right? They don't know your email, but they can look on your website. There's a contact. I've gotten a lot of different opportunities through that.
But it's also an introduction to your work. So if you're building the website, you get to build it the way you want people to see your work and experience your work in a digital sense. And so that can also have an impact in the way that, if someone wants to continue to follow you because of the way you've set it up, even the way you've let somebody in to your work.
I've noticed that about your website. There's the way that there was a face, and we had to kind of explore it at some point. And it's kind of like a journey.
Yeah.
So there's Square. I use Squarespace, but there's WordPress. It's really good. Do you guys have
I
that?
use Squarespace.
Yeah.
I use other people's pixels.
That's what I use.
Okay.
Which used to be more affordable, but it's a US based site, and it used to pay like $16 a month or something. Now it's like $22 a month.
Oh, that's steep.
It's steep.
Yeah.
But it's like all set up. It's just you drag and drop.
So there are formulas for artist websites that some of them are really good.
Yeah.
I've used Wix and Weebly, and then I've stuck with Squarespace now. I like it.
I think it's just what matters is that it's accessible, that your work is there for people to access.
Yes.
I also use Instagram as my one social media, and what I like about Instagram is that it's just images. It could be like a visual diary. It could be things that inspire you. But what I find interesting about Instagram is that, one, it's purely visual. As a visual artist, that's something that appeals to me. But the way that it links you to other people's work. So if you start following other artists that you're interested in, or galleries, or painting companies, or whatever, other people, your work will start showing up in other people's search feeds randomly, which could lead to completely random opportunities.
There are a lot of artists that are using Instagram.
It's easy.
It is.
And some very specifically, like their Instagram is only their work.
Yeah.
it's not personal at all. It's just their work.
Mhm.
But
I don't like random things.
Really?
yeah, I had some like Brazilian architects start following me on Instagram. It was really weird.
Well, it just comes down to aesthetic, right?
Yeah.
You might just like
Yeah.
your aesthetic,
Totally.
the kinds of images you choose.
Yeah. Right.
So you're not on Instagram?
No.
I can't follow you?
Or Facebook.
No.
On Facebook?
Just email and website. In light of social media, digital age, you guys both have commercial representation. Do you find it still crucial? It's still, like, is it a big part of your art practice, or could you live without it?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
because she promotes my work. She provides me with connections
Yeah.
to curators. She does Facebook and Instagram.
She does the whole thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, no, it's
And she's not in Victoria potentially, so
No.
keeping you.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's in Toronto?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Same
similar.
here. Same.
They'll,
Similar
I
philosophy.
mean, ideally they do all the things
Yeah.
you don't want to do in terms of
Yeah.
marketing your own work, and
And again, the 50% cut then is not a big deal because they are doing a lot of work for you.
they
Yeah.
do. And you know, I would sell a lot less work if I had to sell it myself.
Yes.
Let's put it that way.
Yes. Okay, cool. Let's talk a little bit about education. I think it's interesting how all three of you work as educators, and all three of you have MFAs, and that might not be, or a master's, not a master's of fine arts, and that might not be the case for some people in the audience. And maybe you could speak to just kind of the value of formal arts training in a university, and was it valuable for you to get that? Was that a big part of your kind of launching off point?
You speak first. You just
Yeah.
This is fresh.
Yeah. I needed the structure, I think. UVic is a very make school, so I didn't have to take a lot of classes during the program, so it was a lot of studio time, and it felt a bit like almost being in a residency, I would say, and just to have that very specific time to develop my practice, and to have UVic has a visiting artist speaker series, so there were artists and curators that would come through and have studio visits with me, and that was really constructive. You know, the opportunity to TA, I mean, same as you, Sandra, before doing an MFA, introducing myself to a group would have been like very uncomfortable, and so it's given me quite a bit of confidence, and then to be able to teach a class during school was also a really neat opportunity. So I definitely feel I benefit from those things, and I definitely need that sort of supportive community environment. I find to talk about work, and to learn how to research, and to just be able to move forward with things. So for me, it was an important step, but not for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Some people are able to navigate on their own very successfully.
I agree with everything that you said, but I would like to add that the people that you go to school with, those become your peers.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the people who are on the juries looking at your work, and that's essentially your community that you're coming out with.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the people who you are going to be inviting to your studio to look at talk about your work outside of school. So I think that's one. It's about education. Obviously, is really important to have that time to make work and have that support, and facilitates you to make work full time, but also really creates that community as well.
I agree. You're kind of growing up together in a sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree.
You agree? Okay.
And well,
No, it's an important. It's part of it. You're a community,
Yeah.
and that community stays with you for a very long time.
Mhm.
You learn professional practice.
Mhm.
You learn a lot.
For anybody who may be kind of considering going back to school for a master's, or maybe even just for a formal education as like a bachelor's,
Mhm.
would you offer any kind of concrete advice for those people? Kind of on the process of applying for a master's, or that kind of
Oh
thing.
yeah, I mean, I think it's always beneficial to even an undergraduate degree is becoming part of a community,
Yeah.
and you can do that at any age. You can do that right out of high school or in your later years. We have quite a few mature students.
Mhm.
So when you're applying, it's the same as when you apply for a grant. You want to be clear and concise in your application, and you want to present the best possible images of work in your portfolio, and ask questions first. There's always people there to answer questions. Find out about the school, if it's the best school for you. You can only do that by looking on the school's website, looking at who teaches there, perhaps visiting if you can afford it.
Mhm.
Yeah. I think letters of reference are quite important too.
Yeah.
I think to add on to what Sandra was saying, every school offers something different, and it's really important to research who's teaching at the schools you're interested in, and then researching the kind of work that they make,
Mhm.
and where you go might make more sense. So if you work in portraiture, say, and you want to apply to a certain school because there's a faculty member there that works in portraiture, if you write that into your application saying, I want to go study here because I want to study under so-and-so, I think that could really help me. I think that would really help, rather than maybe going to a school that the faculty members don't work in any kind of nowhere near to what you're trying to do. I don't think it just wouldn't make sense
Mhm.
for you to go there.
I agree.
Agreed. So much agreement.
But also, I think it's important to think about. I'm thinking about my experience right now in finishing school, and like if you go to school somewhere and then don't have any intent to stay in that place afterwards, you have to almost start a whole new, like, network, a whole new community in that new place. So thinking about where you might want to spend a bit of time after school so that you can continue to nurture those relationships. I think that's something to consider when you're applying for school.
Yeah, that's why I stayed in Montreal.
Did you stayed there for a time after
Almost
masters?
10 years.
Wow. Yeah. And then you did your BFA here, so you're from
Yeah, I
the
lived here
West.
before.
Yeah.
I have family here, that's why I
Mhm.
moved back.
Yeah.
So if you move to a whole other place, it can be an isolating experience
Yeah.
for a while.
Yeah.
And in order to keep that momentum going, it's not, I think, personally, from my own opinion, I don't think it's a bad idea to consider.
It takes a lot of effort to insinuate yourself into a
Yeah.
community
Yeah,
as an
exactly.
outsider.
And that's
It
the
takes
nice
time.
thing that like if you go away for school, it kind of does that work for you in a way.
Mhm.
Just kind of drops you in with these other
Mhm.
people in the same scenario, and
Yeah. Instant community.
instant community. Yeah, on that note, artist residencies, they're kind of they're everywhere now. And yeah, have you participated in artist residencies? Would you liken them to going to school in any way, shape, or form? Or have they played a significant role in kind of the progression of your practice?
I've only done one residency. I did a residency in Wood Buffalo, Alberta, which is just in a really small hamlet outside of Fort McMurray, and that was interesting. But I did get paid to go,
Oh, great.
so that was like the main reason why I actually applied, because I thought, okay, I'm going to get some money to be there.
Yeah.
Whereas I would never have
Would have to pay you to go to Fort
I would
McMurray.
not have wanted to visit otherwise, maybe. But yeah, it just to get out of my regular routine was really important at that time, and to make work that sort of reflected the environment, and to meet new people, the networking. Again, that was an opportunity because I wasn't the only person in that residency. There were 6 other people. So to learn about other people's practices and get some other conversations going, that was really valuable.
I think residencies are great, and there are more and more these days. There's a website that has artist residencies around the world.
Res artists?
Yeah, and they have when the deadlines are, how many people they go, whether you get funding or not.
You
and
can filter by country.
there's different reasons to do them. Maybe you don't have a studio space and you're looking for, that would be something for 6 months. Or it's great for networking. If you go to a center, you can meet, a city center, you can meet lots of other artists. Just to see the world is a great experience. I haven't done that many personally. I think I did more when I was younger. Now that I have a studio that I love, I'm a little bit more homebound, but not to say that I wouldn't do one.
Yeah.
I agree. I think they're great. I've done a variety, and they've all offered something different, a unique experience. Res Artist is a good site. I did one residency through there. I was searching for ones that were free or paid me, and I applied for it. I didn't get it, but they came back with giving me 50% off. So I thought, okay, sounds good. Deal.
Yeah.
And that was a great experience. I did one at Banff. Banff is great because it's relatively close and accessible, but they do thematic residencies where you have that instant community and you study under somebody. Or you can do a self-directed residency where you just go and you do whatever you propose to do. But what makes Banff great is that they have amazing facilities. So if you want to do some ceramics and you don't have access to a kiln, you could go to Banff and maybe do a project there, for example. When I was there, there was an artist from CalArts who wanted to make a sitcom as her project, and they had everything she needed to make her sitcom.
Amazing.
So, yeah. So residencies are also a way for you to make work that you wouldn't normally be able to make, or have access facilities you wouldn't normally have access to. And some pay, some you have to pay. But, if you are looking to make a very particular body of work that you need certain access to certain facilities, then you just have to pay for it. And you can also apply for funding to go to residencies externally as well.
And a lot of times they'll subsidize, like what happened to you. But I feel like quite a number of residencies that I look at, they usually have a link of that sort of talks about how much it's going to cost, but then there's an opportunity for some subsidy, which makes things a little bit easier.
Yeah, they're very understanding of the artists' situations.
I'm pretty sure I found my residency on
Res Artist?
Res artists. There's also one called Trans Artists, but I think Res Artists is a little bit better laid out.
And Canada has residencies as well through the Canada Council.
Oh, yeah. Those ones...
Much more competitive, though.
Yeah, those are quite competitive, aren't they?
That's true.
But you can get, through the Early Career Development Grant, you can get money to do a residency. It's got sort of several components, and one of them is to do a residency, and that's aimed at emerging artists. Yeah. Okay. I think we'll open it up we could have it be a bit of questions for the panel and answers, but we could also this isn't very conducive to kind of like discussion the way this room is laid out, but if you want to, let's open it up a bit, open floor.
Does anybody have advice for us?
Yeah, advice for us. Questions, things we didn't address that you hope to hear about? Yeah.
Well, I thought the part about marketing was rather short.
Okay.
It's such an important aspect for artists, especially social media. It seems to be the future. So I highly recommend getting on Facebook.
Okay.
That's, not just, it doesn't just consume your time, but it does help spread the word. And I started out on Facebook just getting my friends and family to like it, and then they got their friends, and it just started really spreading exponentially. And what I do is I show my art on Facebook and I reach people because everyone's an addict looking at Facebook all the time. So you get that reach, and then I sell through Etsy, which only takes 3.5%. So you really can't beat that, especially when the galleries take 50%. That seems like robbery, So galleries are great for some people, but it's very confined. Whereas Etsy sells in I think over 30 countries. And you have to ship internationally. So it's a great way to reach people, and all your data is easily stored and organized. It's like a portfolio and a website. And you can go buy our own. Yeah,
Great.
So it's
Good for
Facebook
you.
and social media are just a great combination.
I think some of the website providers too, like I know my website provider, I could make it into a shop if I wanted to. So some website providers, if you didn't want to be with like Etsy, even though Etsy does the kind of work for you, people can search. It's a searchable database.
They just started a feature last month where you can make your own website for free with the very user-friendly software.
Okay.
So it's a website. But the thing with traditional websites is it takes a lot of work to go in and change things. So if you have a painting or sculpture that's sold, you have to go in and change it. So websites, in my opinion, are best just for information about the artist. But Etsy or eBay, something like that, you can very quickly have a turnover of your work. And it takes about 30 seconds really to just change that or renew a listing.
Cool. Yeah.
I found OPP pretty easy to get into and change and fiddle around.
You pay enough for it that
Yeah.
it should be.
And going back to this idea of marketing, I think it depends on who you're marketing to. And this idea of applying for funding and grants and shows is a way of marketing, but it's a way of marketing to a very specific community that's not necessarily about buying work, but exhibiting it, which I think has a trickle-down effect to selling ultimately, because the more you show and the more people see it, the more there's a chance that somebody might want it.
Social media sites and sites like Etsy are great too, because people are already on there specifically to shop. Because if you have a website, they're only going to that one address, so they already have to know their chain. Etsy, you just get a lot of frequent people. Another thing I'm just learning about myself is passive income. So basically, you make an original, and then you make prints or reproductions if it's a sculpture, and then those sell without you having to do the work. So you can hire assistants or other people, and then eventually, like last month I had 20% of my income was passive income, so cards and calendars, that kind of thing, and then eventually the goal was to have 100% income from your passive work. That's something to us.
Yeah, I think that's something that we have to negotiate too, is whether or not we want to do multiples and prints and things like that. It's certainly something I get approached about, but it's not something I like making each thing by hand. I think that there's so much that can be discovered through that process of hand making things that can lead you to so many different trajectories that I don't know if I would pass that off, and for me personally, but I think it depends on your end goal. Like if you're
being an artist is making the art,
right,
definitely, but money is also nice too. So if someone else can make reproductions, you can continue making new originals. Like Robert Bateman, for example, has thousands and thousands of doesn't work for
Yeah,
all artists.
no, it's definitely a viable option, for sure.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on online galleries?
Online galleries.
You know, like storefront, that sort of thing, that actually even send you your very high quality digital image of, say, a 4x6 painting you can't get rid of anywhere else. But you put in, they accept it and they put it onto their site. Do you guys have any experience selling online through any?
I got approached by one and I tried it out. It was based out of the UK and it's never led to anything. So I just forgot about it. And
No. I was just curious about it because I just started exploring that option because, as you're talking about how you need to do whatever it takes to make a living. And that's what I've been doing for 25 years. But I find every 5 or 6 years I got to reinvent that, whatever it is I need to do to keep it going. So I was just looking at that and thinking of the merits of it. And yeah, are there any success stories? Do you know of any? And
I haven't heard any particularly, but if that's something that you're open to, why not?
oh yeah, and it also ties into saying yes to almost everything, right? To try it out and see if it does work for you.
I think for me, it's very important to preserve the live experience of my work, and I never feel that a digital image by any means can capture that. So if I were to make work to sell online, I would make it specifically an online image that had some kind of built-in critique of Instagram or whatever, because
Good gift. Sell a gift.
yeah, I mean, it's different.
Buy my gift.
That's the beauty of an art gallery, is you provide an experience for people that's live, and I don't think that a online gallery can in any way recreate that. If you're making prints or you're making digital images specifically for a wide dissemination, then that's something different. And
I couldn't
yeah.
agree more with you. I mean, than pop-up galleries and, like generally speaking, you have 12 to 20 really great pieces of art in your opinion, but you only sell 50% of them, right? So you're left with this 50%, and so you're left with options. Okay, well, what do I do at the end of this year? Do I have a home studio party again? Just to clear it all out and to get a bit of money again.
I neglected to mention that I spend $400 a month for a storage space where 80% of my work is.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I don't mind. I don't make work to sell. I make work to see. So that's just what I do. But I don't ever expect to sell the work. I'm happy if I do,
For those who aren't familiar, she makes like 50-foot paintings, 50-foot.
Yeah, I've got some big stuff that wouldn't go in your average living room.
That's pretty common. A lot of people do store their work, artists store their work, but I think it's something to consider also that it's really good to get mileage out of your work. If you can show it multiple times in multiple different places and different contexts, it can have different kinds of lives, and I think that's it's good to have that work.
But I'm kind of gearing towards it's like, you create it for a specific purpose, but that purpose didn't necessarily pan out for that piece. So yeah, you bring it, you lend it to the next thing, but often you're left with something. I personally like to get rid of stuff. I don't want to put those walls, because I want that next person to say, oh, so and so did that, and even if I sell it at half price or a third of the price, I want it gone because then it's cash in my pocket.
Yeah.
I'm sort of similar, but it's not about the money. It's more about I want it to be out in the world. I just want it to have its own life and end up in an Antiques Roadshow in 100 years on the other side of the planet.
Yeah.
But that will happen regardless. I think.
Antiques Roadshow?
No, just that the work will have a life
Yeah.
outside of our
I mean,
own.
on the note of sales prices, you do have to be careful, because if you make a piece that in the gallery it's $1,000, and then 5 years from now, let's say somebody buys that one, but then there's that one over there that somebody else buys for $500 5 years later, and the person who bought theirs for $1,000 is going, but what, what, this isn't worth $1,000. So people want the value to go up, not down.
I get that. But I also get the fact that there's, I don't know why I was here, but there are starving artists out there.
Yeah.
Not everyone has a spouse or a partner that can sustain what it is that you're trying to do. Sometimes you're a little desperate.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And so,
of course.
you do step out of those bounds
Yeah.
once in a while. But I'm very careful about those bounds.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's you do bring something down off the price for something, it's usually generally for family,
Mm-hmm.
friends, and family. That you just
Okay. Well, that's different.
yeah. Tell them you paid $3,000 for it.
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. You have to be careful.
Yeah.
It's interesting, the whole concept of the online galleries. They have been increasing. I've noticed, I've been checking them out, and sort of mixed feelings on it myself. I recently signed up with Saatchi just to sell abstract photo-based images, because they're going to be prints anyways. And I'm sort of experimenting with that, but it is, there's that the mixed feeling is, like you say, you want it to be live experience.
Mm-hmm.
It's not live, but you also are looking for ways to get your art out there and reduce the capital of your printing them yourselves, and the exposure that you get from something like Saatchi art or whatever
Mm-hmm.
site you choose. Kind of mixed blessing.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard when you need that money and you're trying to look for ways to make money. And
Sure, whatever works, I
Yeah.
think is all right.
Has anybody experienced doing the art sales and rental through the art gallery?
I know people that have. Yeah, I think it's very good.
I had one painting there.
Yeah,
With the film industry getting,
that's right. Yeah.
more and more here on the island.
Mm-hmm.
I know I have a friend who does that, not just here, but in Halifax.
Mm-hmm.
And she, makes money on things that are renting, so.
Art rental's great too, because people see it and then they get to know your name, and a friend might see it and like it, a friend of the friends, and then, it's a way to develop a reputation.
I know that the friend of mine, Susan Geddes, she's a local artist, and she has income coming in from that, from both
Mm-hmm.
coasts. So, I think that's the route I'm going to go in the new year. At least try it.
Mm-hmm. And then something just came to mind on the subject of the internet, because there are unscrupulous people out there. For example, they could find an ad for an invitation for a show of your work and put it up for sale as a print on their website. Mm-hmm. And a lot of these things happen in other countries, and it's, you might even stumble across it by accident or something, but you have to pay attention and be very careful with.
That's why when you advertise your prints,
Mm-hmm.
you put them in low resolution, so that if
Mm-hmm.
someone does print it out, it's very poor quality.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can send even digital files to people that are high resolutions. It's automatic through
Right.
a website like Etsy.
Yeah.
And then you get the high
Mm-hmm.
quality.
Some websites you do upload like high quality images because you want your work to look its best and kind of like fill the screen, but they'll have like there's not an option to like download or save. Well, not watermark, but there's not an option when you like right click to save or download. The only way to capture that image would be a screenshot, which is also low res. Some of the website platforms have that kind of like built in as a security almost.
I used to do that, but I don't do that anymore because
You used to do what?
I have it locked so they can't download it.
yeah.
But as a teacher, I rely so much
Yeah,
on
yeah, you
images for my lectures that it's really
The
crummy when
fathers.
I get this little tiny pixelated image. Check out this artist.
Yeah.
It's like, so I changed my philosophy
Yeah.
because if somebody wants to show my work, or
Yeah,
I just make it accessible.
yeah.
And if they love it so much, they want to print it off on their printer. Then they can go right ahead. Make a fridge magnet.
Any last questions? Yeah,
I have sort of a random question.
sure.
You all seem to be saying that the motivation is to have your idea represented and sent to the masses and appreciated or not, but seen, right?
Mhm.
So I think we all have a message or an idea we want to share. But unfortunately, I find personally that the art that sells is not the art that I want to make. You know, it's the art that I make because someone invites me to the show, and then someone else wants to commission me, and I get stuck into a loop of producing art that doesn't speak to me. But I can't afford to make the art I want to make.
Oh,
Do you know what I'm saying?
yeah.
How do you avoid that? How do you maintain the integrity of your art but continue to support to pay for the art you do?
Yeah, we didn't really talk about any of that, but I do think I would not survive as a person if I didn't make work that were genuine to myself. And I think that's why having a labor skill or alternative incomes have always been so important. Not to compromise on the work. So, and I think about my audience. I mean, art is a very complicated thing. And you want to make art for the people that are important to you in a way. I mean, I'm not saying don't make art for every man, because of course that's important, but I don't want to compromise my work by
You want to be understood by the people
that matter to me. Yeah. And I would never compromise my work by doing something that I didn't feel were genuine to myself.
I think I told myself that I was practicing,
Mm-hmm.
rather than doing another job, but instead I've got a whole bunch of work out
Mm-hmm.
as my name on it.
But can't you just
Reel it back
stop
in.
doing that?
First step.
I was going to say, just as a note to that, if you feel like you're doing things that you don't want to do more than the things that you want to do, strike a balance, like we're talking about here, you have to strike a balance in your everyday life anyways, right? You can't always be working, you can't always be doing one thing. So you make a contract to yourself for 50-50, and then, but my advice to you is if the stuff that you really love and that you want to do, that's what you should do, because that's what people will buy, because they have a sense of love and that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
They will. And then eventually you'll make money at that because it'll morph into that.
Awesome.
That's the question.
Yes.
Artistic integrity of everything.
Yeah.
It's afterward.
Yeah, I sell out sometimes, for sure. I think you have to a little bit to make money to continue to do what you want, and then eventually the goal is to sell out like none. Just you need a little bit of money to keep going all the time.
I have to agree with what Sandra was saying and keeping that integrity for yourself and for the work. But having said that, I do commissions sometimes, but I always find some way to make it interesting to myself, whether it's through discovering a new sort of methodology or a way of working or working with something that wouldn't normally work. But I'm not inundated with those kinds of requests, so it's easy to just sort of have that laissez-faire attitude towards them. But it doesn't have to be one or the other all the way, I think is what she was saying.
Great. All right. Thank you, everyone, for coming out. Thank you, Sandra, Rick, and Breanna. Yeah. Let's give them
Thanks, Emily.
Thanks, Emily.